16-year-old girl was auctioned off for being in labor, until Jesse James bought her to give her a place to stay. The dust had a way of clinging to skin, to lashes, to the folds of a dress that had already known too many nights in the cold. The girl stood barefoot on the auction block, her hands folded over the swell of her belly, as if that thin gesture could shield her from the world's gaze. 16 summers behind her, none of them gentle, and now this, offered up like broken stock before men whose eyes gleamed with something more cruel than hunger. Lanterns swung in the twilight breeze, their glow catching the edges of faces turned toward her, faces lined with judgment, with gossip, with the sharp curiosity of those who had never known what it was to be cast out. Her name was Clara Mayfield, though few in that crowd would remember it. To them she was only disgrace wrapped in girlhood, shame ripening into labor. The auctioneer, Silas Crowder, wore his greed openly, his hands pressed into the edge of the wooden block as though he were proud of the stage from which he sold souls. His voice carried like a cracked bell. One more lot, gentlemen. One more chance to make use of what life has discarded. He gestured toward her swollen form, smirking, as the whispers thickened. Women shook their heads. Some clutched their daughters' hands tighter, tugging them back lest the contagion of Clara's ruin spill over. She did not bow her head, though her hair was tangled and her dress hung loose and stained from the long road behind her. Though shame burned across her cheeks, Clara lifted her gaze once to the crowd. It was not defiance so much as endurance, the look of someone who had learned that pain was a constant companion, and that holding herself upright was the only dignity she could still claim. But inside, her heart rattled against her ribs, a bird desperate to escape. Every breath carried the dull ache of contractions gathering, warning her that time was running short. She prayed, not for deliverance, but that her child might be born somewhere other than beneath the stares of these people. A boy too young to shave muttered near the front, "She don't look worth a penny." His father cuffed him, but only after a smirk. A woman's voice rose sharp. Her kind should be driven out, not sold. Clara shut her eyes for a moment, the sting of rejection heavier than the weight of her body. She remembered her mother's voice once, soft, telling her that every life was precious. But that voice had been buried 3 winters ago, and no one had spoken to her gently since. Silas cleared his throat, the tone oily with impatience. "Come now, men of Claymore, who'll give me 50 cents? A girl strong enough to bear a child, and bearing one now. Useful, if not exactly pure." Laughter followed, thin and cruel. The first bid was lower still. Clara tightened her grip across her stomach, wishing she could vanish into the air. Then the air shifted. It wasn't the wind, though a gust stirred dust at their feet. It was the silence, sudden and heavy, rolling over the crowd like a shadow. Boots struck the ground with a measured rhythm, and heads turned as though pulled by the same string. From the far edge of the street, a man approached, tall and broad, his long coat trailing dust, spurs catching the last light of day. Jesse James. His name carried in whispers, in warnings. To some he was legend, to others a nightmare made flesh, an outlaw with more blood on his hands than any lawman could reckon. But here, in this place, his presence was enough to turn voices quiet, to make even Silas swallow his words. Jesse's eyes, storm-dark beneath the brim of his hat, found Clara where she stood trembling. He did not leer. He did not smirk. He looked at her as though he recognized something. Pain, perhaps, or the weary endurance of someone too young to have already lost so much. The auctioneer stammered, suddenly uncertain. "Mr. James, I don't reckon. I'll take her." Jesse's voice cut through, low but certain. The crowd shifted, uneasy. A name like his bidding was no small matter. Silas forced a chuckle. "Well, sir, we still need the formality. The others." Jesse's hand moved, and a silver coin clinked onto the wooden rail, gleaming under the lantern light. More than enough. More than any man had considered her worth. The hush thickened. No one dared to outbid him. Even Sheriff Reed, standing stiff with his badge catching the glow, only looked away, unwilling to challenge the outlaw. Clara's heart stumbled in her chest. Bought, yes, but by him? Fear and confusion tangled in her veins. She could not read the expression behind his steady gaze. Silas nodded quickly, the greed in him satisfied. "She's yours, Mr. James." Jesse stepped closer, his shadow stretching over her. Clara braced herself, every muscle taut, but instead of grabbing her arm like the others had before, he extended a hand. A simple gesture, palm open, waiting. She hesitated, shame crawling across her skin. But the murmurs of the crowd pressed in, and something in his stillness felt less like threat than refuge. Slowly, she let her hand fall into his. His grip was strong, steady, lifting her down from the block with a care that startled her. Then, without ceremony, he shrugged off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. It smelled of leather and dust, but it was warmth and it was shelter, and no one had offered her either in a long time. The crowd's whispers followed them as he led her away. Jesse James? Taking a ruined girl? What'll he do with her? Martha Kincaid's voice was sharpest of all. God have mercy, she's better off dead. Clara kept her eyes on the ground, each step a battle not to collapse under the weight of it all. The town fell behind them, lanterns shrinking into fireflies against the dark. The night opened wide and cold. Jesse said little, only guiding her to a horse tethered by the livery. He lifted her gently into the saddle before mounting behind her. She stiffened, every nerve alert, but his arm only rested lightly across, steadying her as the horse began to move. The rhythm of hooves carried them into silence. Clara's thoughts spun like dry leaves. Had she leapt from fire into flood? She dared not speak, dared not ask what he intended. Yet his presence was not heavy with desire, not sharp with cruelty. It was something else, an odd, quiet patience, as though he had carried his own ghosts long enough to recognize another's. The prairie stretched silver under the moon, grasses bending in the wind. They rode until the town was only a memory behind them, until a small cabin appeared against the dark, its chimney leaning, its door sagging but intact. Jesse dismounted, then helped her down, his hand steady on her arm. "You'll rest here," he said simply. She looked at the cabin, then at him, suspicion and exhaustion warring within her. "Why?" The word slipped out before she could stop it. For a moment his eyes met hers, unflinching. "Because you need it." Then he turned to open the door, striking flint to lantern. The glow spilled over rough-hewn walls, a cot, a small fire pit, sparse, but warmer than the block she had left behind. The first wave of pain doubled her over, sharp and undeniable. Jesse caught her before she fell, lowering her gently to the cot. Panic flared in her chest. "It's starting," she whispered, breathless. Fear clutched her throat. Jesse moved quickly, no hesitation. He fetched water, stoked the fire, found rags. His movements were rough, unpracticed, but steady. "Hold on," he told her, voice low. "You're safe here." The hours blurred. Wind rose outside, rattling the boards, a storm rolling over the plains. Inside, firelight painted their faces in flicker and shadow. Clara cried out, clutching at the blanket, sweat slicking her brow. Jesse stayed beside her, bringing water to her lips, pressing his hand into hers when the pain broke her in half. She had never imagined an outlaw's palm could feel like an anchor, steadying her against the storm both within and without. Lightning split the sky, thunder rolling like judgment. Clara screamed, the sound raw, pulling life into the world with her. Jesse's voice rumbled steady. "Breathe. You're not alone." His hand never left hers. Then, in the midst of storm and firelight, a cry sharper than thunder filled the cabin. The thin, piercing wail of new life. Clara collapsed back, tears streaming, as Jesse, with trembling hands, wrapped the newborn in cloth. He stared down at the child, awe breaking through the mask of his face. For a moment he looked almost undone. He placed the baby in Clara's arms, and she held her child close, every breath a miracle. The storm eased, rain softening against the roof. Clara kissed her baby's damp forehead, whispering through tears, "You're safe now." Jesse stood near, silent, watching, the weight of something unspoken pressing against his chest. He had stolen lives, taken what was not his, and yet tonight he had given something back. Clara looked up at him, exhausted, wary, yet grateful in a way words could not capture. He only nodded once, a rough acknowledgement, before turning to tend the fire. Outside, dawn hinted on the horizon, pale light seeping into the storm's retreat. Inside the cabin, the girl once sold for shame cradled her child, no longer on display for judgment, but sheltered, if only for a fragile moment, in dignity. And I, who remember, tell you this. Sometimes salvation does not arrive in the robes of saints or the arms of kin. Sometimes it wears dust and outlaw scars, and yet it is salvation all the same. Remember Clara Mayfield when you reckon with mercy, for she was sold to the highest bidder, and found herself delivered not into chains, but into shelter. But the world is never quick to forget, nor to forgive. Even as dawn spread across the plains, word of Jesse James's act rode faster than any horse, reaching ears eager for vengeance, for gossip, for blood. And in that fragile cabin, as Clara drifted into exhausted sleep, Jesse stood at the door, listening to the quiet between storms, knowing this peace would not last.